quick thing.
Yes, all right, about me. This is the slide I am most competent to talk to you about today. Everything after this is downhill. I am, I guess by background, I'm an electrical engineer. It's what I studied. Very passionate about engineering, sciences. Started a couple of technology companies. Semi-successful because I learned from the failures. Primarily, I practice as a patent attorney. I started a firm, we're Founders Legal. We're a boutique practice, and we specialize in corporate and intellectual property law. My endeavor, my venture into the blockchain space started about this year when I helped co-found a company called Try Mining. Try Mining is a mining technology company, mining on the blockchain, various coins. And my involvement into the blockchain started with Try Mining when I was trying to prove to my friends who were building the company off the ground that they really had no idea what their miners were actually mining, what the algorithms were actually doing. They were just kind of plugging in scripts and letting them run. And so when I set out to prove that they didn't know what they were doing, I conveniently ruptured my Achilles tendon. So I was on a couch for about 4 weeks, and I just took an online course, 22-week period, condensed into 4 weeks about the blockchain, and I became fascinated. I saw a lot of potential. In particular, today I'll talk to you about the potential of the blockchain in the significance of the corporate structure, the business, running a business. So I know you guys, everyone's talking about, right? I heard that what is the significance of the blockchain? Let me give you my perspective and my background on the significance of the blockchain. Well, first, yeah, it's decentralized and distributed, and here's some couple nodes, charts, I found on the internet, fair use, copyrights. This is what a centralized network would look like, a decentralized and a distributed network. And a lot of people, when they hear blockchain, they say, oh, it's a distributed technology. A distributed ledger, or a distributed database. But so what? How does it really matter? Because we've had distributed and decentralized networks and databases for quite some time. What innovation does really the blockchain provide here? Especially, is a redundancy of storage information. It really kind of had to go a little bit deeper and ask. And I found this test. And I got it from somebody off the internet, but if someone's describing what their blockchain technology does, and you could replace the word blockchain with distributed database or distributed ledger, like for example, we're using the blockchain to store medical records. And if they explain it to you, and you could still fit the definition of distributed database or distributed ledger in place of the word blockchain, there's got to be more to it. All right, that's just not enough that it's just distributed. So watch out for the fake news of people doing blockchain companies because they're in a distributized networking environment. That's really not all there is to it, I would argue. Trustless. You don't need to trust somebody. And the cool part about the blockchain is not only that it's decentralized or distributed, but you don't really need to trust who you're interacting with. And a quick example is an escrow service. And we'll use this example again a little bit later on. But an escrow is a centralized party that determines when a transaction is truly complete to exchange the goods that they're entrusted to hold. So I believe the strength in the blockchain is that it's enabled a decentralized and trustless system. And a quick recap on how distributed trustless, but it's achieved in two concepts we're not going to get into. Cryptography, hashing algorithms for blocks of data, as well as mining and rewards, the costs and incentives of the participants. And I think the beauty of Bitcoin in the initial Bitcoin white paper is it solved a lot of issues in this space. All right, that's the technical background of the blockchain. We're not going to get too far into it. Obviously, we know what the blockchain has been used for: record keeping, asset tracking, and it's most evident in the cryptocurrency space. We're not going to be talking about that today. We're going to be talking more focused on evolution of blockchain technology, and that's the decentralized applications. Instead of just storing a ledger, or data in the different nodes, some folks have come up with ways to have these nodes run virtual machines that could execute code in a distributed and trustless environment. And that is what appeals to me the most, and that's what I'm going to be talking to you guys about here today. In particular, we're going to talk about the smart contract, just so I get an idea of my audience. Who knows what a smart contract is? Excellent. Okay, good. So we don't have to get too much in the details because I really don't know too much of the details and the technical side of how it works. But applications that run exactly as programmed without any possibility of downtime, censorship, fraud, or third-party interference. Yes, they're distributed and decentralized, but they enable trustless business environment, trustless transactions. That's what we're going to emphasize today. A basic example of a smart contract, super simple. This is a representation of a smart contract in a blockchain environment. It's supposed to be a blockchain environment. You could fund a smart contract. You could set it some rules, and when these rules are met, the smart contract will perform an action. Just a basic example of this. Can I ask for somebody's help here? If you could just list one example of a smart contract application that they've heard about or used.
The Ethereum name service where you can register your wallet just like you register a URL today on the web. So instead of being a long 26-character name, there's a smart contract that you can register with that says Andy Knable translates to this address.
And that runs on the blockchain, and anyone goes to one address, the smart contract will route them to another address.
Yes.
You're not relying on a human to do that. You're relying on code to execute it. So let me give you a question here. Why can't that be done without a blockchain?
Yeah, that could be done without a blockchain.
Right. A lot of smart contracts, a lot of their applications, they could still be done without a blockchain. So I ventured out to ask, what about the blockchain and smart contract technology could be really, really interesting? Something that hasn't been done before. Go ahead.
Well, actually, I was going to take a step back on that
Sure.
because I was thinking about it more. The element of that being on the blockchain is the ownership component, which says, I am the owner of that address in that wallet, which does go to more like not an escrow, but
A distributed proof, a distributed ledger.
Yeah. So I think there is a blockchain component to that one.
Absolutely, there is a blockchain component,
Yeah.
but the trustlessness is what I want to
Yeah.
discuss in substantial depth. Go ahead.
Exactly what I was saying. You already answered your question, the trustless nature.
Right. It's that fact that when we have a decentralized, could you mute that phone, please? Thank you. That's my cousin. He's giving me trouble. In a decentralized and distributed environment where we're saying anybody could be a node, anybody could be a miner, anyone could be a participant and store data as long as they've got hardware for it and whatnot, or can execute our algorithms here. What prevents bad actors? In that scenario, if anyone can do anything they want and store your data, what can we do to prevent people from falsifying data or manipulating this network? We need to establish this environment where we don't need to trust the intentions of any actor. And that is what I find the fascinating aspect of how different takes on the blockchain have been able to execute that segment. So let's talk about, we went backwards in time. Okay, so smart contracts on the blockchain, some things that I find do meet my kind of stringent definition of the blockchain, and no, absolutely not the only one, not the only definition. I'm sure many would agree, but the control of money and distribution, that's something that not only do we want a distributed and decentralized environment without a central oracle player, but we also want the ability not to trust anyone in this environment, to know that my money in control and sharing of my money is secured. Ownership control, issuance and revocation of ownership, such as stock. Again, something I'll explain could be used and benefit in the decentralized environment, as well as a trustless environment. And the recordation and issuance of data. Right now, these are bullet points. I hope by the end, they'll make sense in the corporate governance structure. So, you want to start a company, and you want to say different people own different amounts of equity, ownership in your company. Right now, you have shares without the blockchain. We say, I have 50 shares, you have 50 shares. The total amount of shares in our company is 100 shares. Well, smart contracts enable you to set up a contract that will issue shares and control and regulate the ownership of those shares. So I'm going to read this because this is going to say it better than I can. You can create a tradable digital token that can be used as a currency, a representation of an asset, a virtual share, or a proof of membership, or anything at all as it relates to your company. The total amount of tokens in circulation can be set to a fixed amount or fluctuate based on your rules, your company rules. So issuing a token is the most basic form of building a team in a company on the blockchain. We're going to say, everyone on my team, we all get one token. Now, what do we do with that token? That's up to us and how we define our corporate organization and structure. A little bit more on that later. Use case number 2, kickstarting a project. Everyone's familiar with Kickstarter here.
Yeah.
Do you guys have an idea of how smart contracts can be used in place of Kickstarter? How does Kickstarter work? Well, you send strangers your money. You hope their project gets funded. And if it does, you hope that you'll get a product within a year that you paid for. There's not really much transparency. And if there's an issue, you got to rely on the Kickstarter folks to make sure you get your money back or they enforce their rules. And that's been a great success. Kickstarter has helped millions of companies and entrepreneurs, maybe not millions, but a lot, establish the right funding they need to get their company off the ground. I love Kickstarter. It's been a great tool, but I think Kickstarter is going to be eventually outdated by Ethereum or other decentralized applications and smart contract platforms. So a little bit more on kickstarting a company on the blockchain. A smart contract will hold the contributor's money until any given date or goal is reached. So you send money into the smart contract, and it's going to wait for certain conditions to happen. In exchange, it's going to issue a token as a proof that you've contributed money. All this is possible without requiring Kickstarter in the middle. Or, and by the way, I want to say this image here in that definition of kickstarting a company is from Ethereum. I'm a big fan of Ethereum. You should guys check out ethereum.org. But is there any questions on here how people who contribute to your project can put money into a smart contract? The smart contract will issue a token equivalent to their contribution, and that token can be used later to redeem what you paid for or what you bought into. That's step 1. Any questions on that? Right. Rewards in crowdfunding are usually handled by a central, unchangeable database that keeps track of all the donors. Anyone who missed a deadline for the campaign, it's too late, they can't put money in. And if you change your mind after you put money in, you can't get out. Well, if you're using a decentralized way to create a token and keep track of these rewards, anyone who contributes a token can trade these tokens. Say, you know what, I changed my mind. I invested in this company, but you know, hey, if you want, I'll give you my token for half price. And you could trade your token. You create liquidity in the ownership of your contributions to a project. You don't have to stick to it if you don't want to. All right, smart contracts can be arranged as such. So finally, when the time comes, and there's a physical product, let's say that your token could be exchanged for, you show proof of the token, and you know, of course, the blockchain isn't quite right for ensuring physical delivery of goods, but it could be used as asset tracking to ensure that particular asset has been delivered and verified to be delivered to you in exchange for that token. So this is a very basic example of how you would kickstart a project on the blockchain. You say, instead of giving me, going on Kickstarter and contributing to strangers through Kickstarter, you'd purchase tokens from this company. And these tokens, are secure because they're stored on the blockchain, and the smart contract that governs the tokens, it's going to execute in accordance to the rules. It was pre-programmed to do so, regardless if the founders of this Kickstarter project decide to change their mind and run off and take your money. This smart contract system will prevent and ensure that that does not happen. All right. So I'm going to go over this one last time and introduce one concept here. Strangers can purchase tokens. These tokens are governed by smart contracts, so they're trustless. You don't need to know the people you're investing into. You do want to audit the smart contract, and we'll get into that. And the smart contracts will define the value of the token and what you can do for it. Your token could be a right to exchange your token for a product. You might have a resale or transfer right for that token. You could take that token and sell it to somebody else. But also, you might now have control of how the money you contributed is spent. And this is where we go into the next phase, and it's democracy. How to use smart contracts to establish a democratic environment where every token holder has a say in a project. Where that's important is you can start to get a sense as if me and my friends are starting a company, we want to ensure that, our rights, our voting rights are preserved and tokenized. If I'm starting a company with strangers, I want to make sure that my voting rights are preserved in a smart contract system. It's trustless. So token owners with voting rights, generally those are, those who fund a Kickstarter project, they won't have any say how the money is spent. But let's say you're in a token system and you say, guys, invest in my project, you'll get a token. Here's the initial spec. And if I have to change the spec, every one of the token owners can have a vote on those changes. And you vote in proportion to how many tokens you have. And so the majority of token holders can say if there needs to be change of the spec, you got to convince the majority to change the spec, right? So it's a way to give control to investment in a company, in a Kickstarter-like environment. Make sense? Sure.
I mean, pretty much doing this with ICOs, except that they're not giving up control. So what would incentivize any startup to use this use case example versus doing an ICO, where with an ICO they can still raise money, keep control, but here they raise money, get selling tokens, but they don't maintain control. Why would anyone want to choose? What is the incentive to choose this versus?
Excellent question. Excellent question. Firstly, in ICO, in issuance of tokens under smart contract control, it's the infrastructure is virtually the same. If you're taking a, Ethereum token as an example. But why I would choose this environment, firstly, if I were to set up this environment, I'd make sure the majority of the tokens I retain. So I'm going to issue 1 million tokens, I'm going to keep 600,000, and the other 400,000 I'm going to sell for in a Kickstarter crowdfunding environment. So there's a way to do this where I still keep control. Second, think of non-public offerings. In a world where you're working with friends or you're working with a close group of people, you're not going around and trying to create a public offering. You wouldn't want, in a public offering situation, for 1 million different people to have voting rights in your company. This is for when you're actually starting a business with your partners. And you want to make sure that everyone gets a say in how the money is managed. You want to make sure everyone gets a vote in your company proportional to how many tokens they have and their contribution in order to get those tokens. So you got to look at the use case. It's not every use case.
Well, in your smart contract, it might just be voting rights like share stock, voting on board of directors, basically. So it can be limited.
And in the flexibility of a smart contract is you get to control and define how your partnership agreement or your shareholders agreement is structured. So you define how you want your organization to work, You find some smart contract developers, and hopefully they build it out the way you want it to happen. And as soon as you issue those tokens, those token owners should have the same rights that you defined in your operating agreement or in your company's shareholders agreement. So I hope I'm answering these questions clearly. So this brings us to the pinnacle of the blockchain. I believe that the smart contract system, the biggest and best use case from a lawyer standpoint, is DAO. And I've seen this defined a couple of interesting ways. One, democratic autonomous organization, and two, decentralized autonomous organization. Ethereum, the founders, they use democratic autonomous organization on one page, and then on another page they talk about it as a decentralized autonomous organization. I guess democratic would imply voting rights. Token holders get to vote and control the operation. Sure.
Why does one call that thing autonomous?
Autonomous is because it will run without human intervention to the extent you programmed it to do so. So we'll use some exact examples.
But it's not, without programming, it's not autonomous. So it's not autonomous of humans.
You can have it autonomous in the sense that there's no CFO, COO.
Like, I guess in theory, if you had a board of directors and they all voted to make a decision on something, it's up to the staff of that corporation to carry out their plan. But in this situation, it's up to the computer to carry out the plans. The computer can't affect that.
Yeah, we'll use some exact examples of what I mean by autonomous. Autonomous has, automated, could be another word rather than autonomous that you might be a little more comfortable with. But, good question. But DAO, DAOs, you probably heard of the DAO, but realistically there are many versions. And everyone today on the Ethereum platform that I know can create their own DAO. Start a company with your friends, set the rules and operations of the company in accordance to some examples I'm going to give here today. So, I not learned that this clicker does not work. All right, who's going to be building democratic or decentralized autonomous organizations? My guess is we're going to see the biggest adoption in the early adopters of technology. Those companies that rely on the partners and their sweat equity to start, who have limited funding and have limited experience, meaning they don't have a big board of directors or a large pool of money to work with. I anticipate that startup companies, essentially what I may have defined here, are going to be trending towards setting up organizations. I envision a world where one day you could meet your next co-founder at a meeting and not really need to worry about if I put in $15,000 and they put in $15,000, that they're going to take the money and run. Because you could set up a smart contract system to manage the money. I picture a time where the ownership of a company is defined in how many tokens I have that is regulated and maintained in a decentralized and trustless fashion on the blockchain. I hope those words mean something to you, and I'd love to clarify and answer any questions if they don't. But starting a company is going to be facilitated with much less lawyer fees on the blockchain. Here are a few exact examples how. Stock issuance, profit sharing and bonus distribution, voting rights and record keeping, transparency, and liquidity. Those are going to be concepts that, well, they are concepts that are common amongst all corporate entities. But if you put it on the blockchain, in a smart contract system, these become fascinating. Stock issuance. Right now we issue shares, and you got to sign your forms to receive the shares for tax purposes. Some shares in public trade companies are actually on physical pieces of paper. In most companies and organizations, they're probably on an Excel sheet somewhere that shows you how many shares you have of a total amount of shares. These different shares can come in different types. You could have preferred shares, the ones that get distributions of money first. You could have shares that have voting rights with them. They could have shares that don't have voting rights with them. In the corporate world, we call that different classes of stock. In the blockchain world, we're going to call it different classes of tokens. Same idea, but now we're going to tokenize it. An interesting example of a lot of startup companies do with shares is called the vesting schedule. Do you guys know what a vesting schedule is? Do you picture it on a smart contract system?
Yep.
You picture that, a vesting schedule, for those that don't know, say, hey, I own 50% of the company, you own 50% of the company. Well, we're going to receive our shares over time. We're not going to get them all at once. Because we want to ensure that you stick to it and I stick to it before I give you everything and you run. Okay? Or you want to bring an employee on. You see this employee is a good worker. You know what? If you work with me for 4 years, over 4 years, you're going to be 25% owner in my company. And you put them on a vesting schedule. Well, that vesting schedule today is typically done over time. Every year you work with me, you'll vest a portion of your shares in my company. When you put it in a smart contract system, you as an employee, you're protected now. Or you're the person who's on the vesting schedule. You're protected now. You're not going to rely on the founders of this company or the executives of this company to issue stock or at the end of the year try to remember what they promised or whatnot. That's going to happen on a schedule, one that you don't need to rely on anyone to execute. You know, part of your company, you didn't just sign a blank piece of paper that says you're going to get 25% in 4 years. You know there's an application running that can't be stopped unless certain conditions are met that you have agreed to. And you know that those vesting terms will happen. Objective-based vesting. It's not based on time, but based on, let's say I meet my metrics. And every time I meet a quarterly metric, I'm going to get more tokens. And the smart contract system can be used to monitor certain metrics. And when those metrics are met, it could issue or assign tokens to you, which means now your equity in a company has increased. So that's one way to parallel stocks to tokens. Question?
This paradigm of shifting what today exists in the stock market, the stock issuance into tokenization.
Right.
I guess it's a question, but startups do this. What is the real world legal footprint left? Is there anything that exists in legal contracts or is everything moved on?
Remember, lawyers are still going to be needed to draft up the original agreements. They're going to still be needed to help you structure the company you want in the legal framework. It's that, when they're finished with that, they would take that contract and pass the baton to a smart contract developer whose job would be to take that agreement and make an executed instruction of codes, or executable instruction set to run in accordance to that agreement the lawyer said. Then, once that's done, you need a smart contract auditor to review the code and tell you what it does, and then again the lawyer to review what the auditor has said that smart contract does.
What about the events that occur? Instead of having a time base where certain deliverables
Right.
have to be delivered of such and such quality, is that still not a third person that has to come in?
Well, what if you tie your smart contract to regulate a cryptocurrency account? All right, it serves as an escrow account.
I'm saying, say the smart contract is to build it.
Right.
Yeah, smart contracts can't trigger themselves. Somebody still has to initiate the transaction.
Absolutely, and there are, and of course, there's in this system.
But that doesn't matter because the rules are built.
They can trigger themselves, you just have to have the issue is the subjectivity of the deliverable.
Right.
I'll give you an easy example where you need an oracle or human being saying, all right, this event did occur and the smart contract is now triggered. That's many of those type of events. The ones, one second. A system could be a sales guy. And I'm going to tell the sales guy, as soon as you hit $1 million in sales, you're going to vest 15% of this company. And I'll put that in a smart contract, and that smart contract is going to monitor the account all that money is going to go into. And as soon as it sees $1 million in that account, or 1 million Bitcoins, it's going to vest. To me, as somebody who's joining a company, and I don't know the founders or, they have all the best intentions, and I'm not saying people are out to get you, but I've been in a lot of companies, and the founders are just, they don't have time to execute, or they save it for later. And for me, that's I want it there. I want a smart contract running to make sure it happens.
So with smart contracts, the main benefit is that it's immutable and changeable once it's written, right? Essentially.
But if you have a democratic smart contract, the token holders can vote on certain proposition of changes, what we'll see. But yes.
So let's say you wanted to change, add, or remove rights. Let's say, like we issued this, and then there's like a new scenario that happened. How have you seen people tackle that?
I haven't seen
You have to build that in, because it is
Yeah.
immutable, but there could be logic built in that say, you know, if they vote, this many people vote a certain way, then this logic will run. So, and there's also the concept of upgrading contracts and things like that, but that's another topic.
Right. So I want to, guys, I know we have like 10 minutes before the Q&A session. So if you guys could save some questions to the end. Profit distributions on a smart contract, decentralized, autonomous organization. Anytime we have money in this account and the certain class of stock says we are ready for distribution, or certain class of token holders vote on a distribution and allocate a certain amount of money in distribution, you know that the smart contract will allocate the exact amount of money owed to you based on how many tokens you own. In other words, when a company makes profit distributions and you're entitled to a piece of the profit distribution, you'll know the math is correct and you'll know you'll never miss a distribution. There'll never be a hidden distribution that you didn't know about, because all distributions are regulated in a decentralized autonomous organization. Now, here are what a lot of companies do. Employee bonuses, okay? They say, hey, you're going to be eligible for a bonus at the end of the quarter. And then they arbitrarily can set a number and say, all right, you get $250 or you get $2,000. How do you know? What's your control? Smart contracts enable you to issue your own internal currency. And a lot of small business owners have done this in the past, where they give their employees currency that they could trade in for a bonus at the end of the quarter or at the end of the year. Smart contract systems enable you to create these rewards and incentives. Say, hey, whoever completes this project gets an issuance of 250 tokens. And now you have 250 tokens, so the next time a profit distribution occurs, it's going to take into account that you have 250 tokens that are eligible for a profit distribution. Voting rights. Now, in a company, not every type of share or class of stock is going to have the same type of voting rights. Some are going to be board level voting, others are going to be just general shareholder voting. You could program that into your smart contract DAO-based company, just as you would today. The infrastructure is already there. The best part of I find is that you eliminate the need for legal formalities, to have somebody sit there and take meeting minutes to record the resolution. Current technology on the smart contract system allows for a vote to be called, allocates a period of time where people can discuss the vote on the record, and calls for the vote with a deadline, counts the tallies of the votes based on tokens, and executes an action based on that resolution that has been voted in. There's added transparency here. You know what's going on. All the formalities of the companies are being met. You don't need to worry about missing any legal requirements in running a corporation. A very interesting concept that can be adopted and is ready for adoption today. Finally, liquidity. And this is going to vary from company to company. But if you own stock in a private company, you're pretty much going to be really restricted in what you can do with that stock. I picture this will change over time. If you are a token holder, and let's say, God forbid there's a medical emergency in your family, and you own some stock in your company, how are you going to find a buyer to sell that stock? Are you allowed to sell that stock in the first place? Right now, it's really up to the corporate structure, but in the future, where you have a decentralized autonomous organization, every token holder is going to know their rights, what they can do with these tokens. And if they need to temporarily share those tokens with others in exchange for money, they'd be able to do that. So it adds liquidity in your ownership of companies. So that just about leaves 5 minutes for questions, guys. That's the end of this presentation. I really ran through things, but my goal here was to show you the capability of a decentralized or democratic autonomous organization using smart contracts on the blockchain, not just based on the premise that the blockchain is a distributed ledger, but that it's trustless. And when you're in business, not needing to trust the parties you're in business with or your customers or strangers, I think makes it an excellent use case for a DAO, decentralized autonomous organization. So thank you guys. Open for questions. I didn't get my contact info wrong, so that's the right contact. If you guys have any questions, feel free afterwards or now. Question?
Can you with economically DAO?
I cannot. This is experimental. Really, if you look at, everyone here has heard of Ethereum, right? Ethereum is pushing this hard. On their main page of ethereum.org, they talk about the DAO. They actually say, look, we've built it for you. Use it. I have not personally worked with any companies who have made an autonomous organization function and work. I think it's in the very early stages.
Dash network.
Dash network?
Yeah, a lot of ICOs, Ethereum-based ICO companies are experimenting with this to a degree and have varying degrees of governance built into some contracts. Like you said, try to think of good examples of people really successful.
So Dash is probably arguably the best implementation so far.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a general
What did you
purpose.
say?
Dash?
Dash, yeah.
You had a question?
Yeah,
Comment?
right now, the fact that, you have a legal background, right now in like the court of law, would a smart contract, would that stand up? Like, are we at the point right now where code is law, or is it still kind of up for debate?
No, I don't think it'd be up for debate.
Okay.
Because a smart contract is, firstly, in your legal contract, you would consent to the execution of the legal contract on an electronic medium. And I really don't see, the law is always going to be behind advanced technology and emerging technologies, and it's always going to be catching up. And so I don't see the law playing a hurdle. I think it'll take some time to catch up and adapt, but I don't think it'll stop anything here. Someone who hasn't asked a question yet. I'm not good at this. Whoever talks first.
All right. So, Founders Legal, you guys plan on hiring developers for smart contracts?
We are. We're actually currently looking for smart contract developers. But as a lawyer, I don't want any of that liability, because if a developer messes up a line of code, you could have all that money you had put into your corporate account that you thought was going to get distributed at the next distribution go to your lawyer's account. Yeah, I wouldn't take the, it would be a pass the baton. Okay. Yeah.
Well, just on that note you said about the developer messing up a line of code, I mean, just could you elaborate on how you see if hypothetically smart contracts started taking off,
Yeah.
people started using them, how do you think the role of the developer would change now if they're starting to become more like a lawyer?
Well, here's how I see what happened. You go to founderslegal.com or your lawyer's website, this is 10 years from now, and you click Start a Company, and you choose a template. And these templates have been tried and tested. How to run a company. And I think I've talked to several people who've actually suggested, that the people who created these solid templates get a fee for every use of the template to incentivize good, solid templates that have been used and trusted. But you choose your smart contract DAO-based template on basic premise, and you start on the basics, and you customize as needed for your specific organization.
Just FYI, there's a company called Ergon.
Yep.
And they essentially building what you're suggesting.
And I'd like to see who their users are. I'd like to meet those.
I don't know if they're in production yet, but I think they're close.
They're close.
They might be, but still.
I think you had a question, David?
Yeah, just a lot of this stuff comes with from the immutability of these contracts and things like that. There's a ton of tax implications, like
Oh, yeah.
You're a patent attorney.
Yeah.
Tax implications of deferred compensation.
Yeah, I've heard.
Changing a lot, so how would you envision keeping up with?
You got to know, as soon as you receive a security or ownership in a company, whatever the fair market valuation of that is your taxable basis. So if you just got 25% of a $2 million company, but you can't cash out for 2 years, tax law, and I'm not a tax professional at all, the tax law would say you got to pay taxes at the time you received $2 million worth of stock. So,
That's what I'm talking about, there's an exception.
So-
Throw it on in.
So yeah, there's a lot of tax implications that is beyond the scope of what I can speak
I
on.
know it's beyond scope, but how are you going to,
Good tax accountants.
The tax accountants aren't going to know how to manipulate your.
You're right, my tax accountant doesn't.
Do you guys provide services as the oracles for the subjective to the commodity? Whatever needs to be verified, objectively in smart contracts. Objective-based.
Auditing, smart contract auditing.
Not auditing, but say objective-based goals.
Okay, so issuance of tokens based on objectives being completed.
Right, so the subjectivity, whether or not the objective was completed, is that something that you provide as a service?
Well, yeah, I see what you're saying. People who make sure that whatever triggers a smart contract indeed happens. Another excellent point. Right now I envision in a democratic organization where all the token holders will vote whether or not a triggering event has occurred, and that way you could spread across the token holders, hey, yes, this happened, let's do a distribution. Or no, this doesn't happen. And it puts the subjectivity in the hands of the majority, if that answers your question. Thank you guys. Thanks for your attention.